Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and what a day it was. Yep, let the games begin. Oh, this was a definite defeat for the Democrats again, but because of how it was put together, I tend to think people are going to see it as a win. Here's why. Because they had it set up so the first hour and a half to 2 hours, however long that was all Democrats. And it was all from their point of view because they started out with Adam Schiff and his point of view, which is bizarre. And I don't know what's wrong with that guy's eyes. I mean, they're worse than they were. They're like popping out all the time. Is he like on something or what? I don't know. But it's creepy looking when you watch his eyes. Ooh, very creepy. Anyway, so you had his opening statement, then you had the opening statements of the two men, and then you had the Democrat lawyer. He was the one that came in and asked all the questions for them. So it was really a long time. Now, for a lot of people, I could envision them watching that much of it and going, this is a snoozer. I'm going to go watch something else. And then all they would have heard was the negative stuff. And they would say, well, see, Trump must be guilty because that's what they're saying. And that's the way, we've talked about this before with articles, the headline. Some people only read the headline, a good portion of people. Some will read the headline in the first couple of paragraphs, but very few people actually read an entire article anymore, all the way to the end. Well, they count on that because what they do is they can put their smears up in the headline or in the first couple of paragraphs and then say things at the end that will exonerate them or at least keep them from getting sued. And, that's how they play it. But that way people see the negative at the first, and that's what they assume is the real story, even though at the very end of the article, maybe they will totally contradict it. That's just how it works. And with this, I think it was a similar thing. I think they did that. They downloaded all of the Democrat stuff up first, all the negative anti-Trump stuff. And then they were hoping that people would watch that much and go, well, he must be guilty. I've got better things to do, so I'm taking off. However, some of us are tenacious and we stayed through the whole thing. So I didn't even, I watched this one straight out. I didn't even do the fast forward type thing on it like I normally do. But hey, I suffered through it. It's just Adam Schiff talked a lot in this. So maybe that's why I had time to look at his eyes. I don't know. But anyway, so here's the situation, just in case you weren't aware. These two guys, both of them, are hearsay witnesses. They don't know. They weren't there, not firsthand. Everything they said was, I think, I feel, somebody told me. It's so bogus. That's not how you have a case. You need to have firsthand witnesses. And at one point, one of the Democrats even said, well, there's a lot of cases where the hearsay witnesses are even better than the direct witnesses. It's like, really? Seriously? You think hearsay witnesses are going to be more accurate than a direct witness? This is what we're fighting against, folks. Yep, this is it. Well, anyway, so there were a few really stellar moments, and I can't show them all to you. So I will give you the link to this page. If you want to watch them all, you can. But what's really interesting is if you come here, you can actually go down and pick out the people you want to listen to, and it'll give you a link to that. Now, they do put in little stars. These little stars are specific points of interest that C-SPAN thinks you want to know. And they're like, this one is Schiff and Nunes opening statements. Then we have their George Kent's opening statements. And then we have William Taylor's opening statements. And then, these almost all of them are negative, are anti-Trump. This one is definitely pro-Trump because this is where Nunes begins. And then Castor takes over, who is the lawyer for the Republicans. And then this again was kind of a negative, does have Jim Jordan on there. And it's just, I don't know how they come up with those, but very, very interesting. So, you can go through here, you can see if you click on this, you can see it will bring up the different text and everything. So, yeah, stop. Anyway, but you can go to the specific people, everyone who spoke. Now, the first one I want to show you a clip of is this Elise Stefanik. Wow, she went through, and there's just hardly any way to cut what she was saying because she put down a very well thought out argument, and she went from one to the other and laid it all down in a very logical format. I got to say, I was really impressed by her. So yay for her. And then she's been getting some flack on Twitter from, I think it was an MSNBC guy he said something about it being a bad idea, that just because you vote for somebody who's female or whatever, it doesn't always work out, or I don't know. It was really a derogatory thing. So yeah, that was not good. Evidently was really big on Twitter. I haven't spent much time on there today, so I didn't know. But anyway, so I'm going to play a little clip from her, and then I'll come back, and I've got a couple more clips I want to show you.
You're recognized.
Thank you. For the millions of Americans viewing today, the two most important facts are the following. Number one, Ukraine received the aid. Number two, there was in fact no investigation into Biden. Mr. Kent and Ambassador Taylor, you both spoke eloquently and passionately about the need to support Ukraine to counter Russian aggression, particularly during this very critical time. I agree with you in that assessment. And isn't it the case that the Trump administration has indeed provided substantial aid to Ukraine in the form of defensive lethal aid, correct?
That is correct.
And that is more so than the Obama administration, correct?
The Trump
defensive lethal aid?
Yes.
And in the transcript of the president's July 25th call with President Zelensky tells Trump they are ready to buy more javelins. This is indeed the most effective weapon for fighting insurgent armor Russian tanks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those javelins were not made available to Ukraine under the Obama administration? The javelins were not made available?
They were not.
Correct. Shifting gears to corruption. One of the themes here today is that of rooting out corruption, which is an important tool for the president as we provide taxpayer-funded aid to foreign countries. Mr. Kent, you would characterize Ukraine as having long-standing corruption issues, correct?
I did.
And in fact, you testified, quote, I would say that corruption is part of the reason why Ukrainians came out to the streets in both 2004 when somebody tried to steal the election and again in 2014 because of a corrupt, kleptocratic, pro-Russian government which eventually collapsed. The Ukrainians decided enough was enough. Is that your testimony?
It remains so.
And you testified that you first came to learn about Burisma in 2015 when you were the senior anti-corruption coordinator, correct?
Correct. Detailed to the embassy in Kyiv as the acting deputy chief of mission.
And you testified that the issue of corruption in Burisma was in the U.S. interest because, quote, and this is from your deposition, we had made a commitment to the Ukrainian government in 2014 to try to recover an estimated tens of billions of dollars of stolen assets out of the country. Is that correct?
That is a stolen assets that were in the name of the owner of Burisma, Mykola Zlochevsky. He was the one who we believed had stolen the money.
Sure. So the first case, this was the first case that the U.S., the UK, and Ukraine investigators worked on was against the owner of Burisma.
That's correct.
And this was during the Obama administration.
That's correct.
So for the millions of Americans viewing, the first investigation against the owner of Burisma was under President Obama's administration.
That's correct.
You testified also, quote, we spent roughly $500,000 of State Department money in support of the FBI and this investigation to build capacity and track down stolen assets, end quote. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was launched in May 2014 by the Attorney General of the U.S. and U.K. In conjunction with the World Bank.
And in fact, by 2016, you were so concerned about corruption questions related to Burisma that when there was an effort by Burisma to sponsor an essay contest with USAID, you asked USAID to stop it.
That's correct.
And you testified that it was because, quote, Burisma had a poor reputation in the business and that you didn't think it was appropriate for the U.S. government to be co-sponsoring something with a company that had a bad reputation. Correct? You are also aware, and you testified today, that Hunter Biden served on the board of Burisma.
Correct.
And you also testified that you were indeed concerned about the appearance of conflict of interest.
That's correct.
And broadly, this is very important, you testified in your deposition that when the State Department evaluates foreign assistance, it is appropriate for them to look at levels of corruption in countries.
That's correct.
And lastly, you also testified that, and this is your quote, issues of corruption have been part of high-level dialogue between U.S. leaders and Ukrainian leaders, regardless of who is the U.S. leader and who is the Ukrainian leader, and that is a normal issue of diplomatic discussion at the highest level, end quote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I will yield 30 seconds. You know what? I will yield back after that. Thank you.
Yeah, see, she nailed it. Wow. She just went through and she had this, and this. She did a great job planning that and then implementing it. Way to go, Elise Stefanik. Oh, so then I want to show you this. This actually happened before Elise Stefanik, but this one was the lawyer. This is the guy who was the lawyer for the Republicans. And he started out asking questions. Well, guess what? Yep, Adam Schiff just couldn't keep his mouth shut. And there was a little bit of a kerfluffle. So here it is.
Ambassador Taylor, Mr. Kent, President Trump's concerns about Ukraine's role in the 2016 election, you believe he genuinely believed we're working against him, right? Ambassador Taylor?
Ms. Kessler, I don't know what President or candidate Trump was thinking about the Ukrainians.
I mean, didn't he in this Oval Office meeting on May 23rd after the Zelensky inauguration, didn't he lament that the Ukrainians were out to get him?
I heard that his response to the suggestion that Mr. Zelensky visit Mr. Trump, President Trump, in the Oval Office was not well received, and that he had concerns about Ukrainians. Yes.
But from the president's perspective, if the ambassador, Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, one of the most influential diplomats, is penning an op-ed, certainly with the okay of President Poroshenko, the DNC consultants are conferring with Ukrainian officials at the embassy. Former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk is saying things on social media. Interior Minister Avakov, who has spanned both the Poroshenko and the Zelensky realm, is also saying some very unkind things on social media about the president. You certainly can appreciate that President Trump was very concerned that some elements of the Ukrainian establishment were not in favor of him, did not support him, and were out to get him.
If I go to, and I'll allow the question, but are you asking?
Parliamentary inquiry, are you seriously interrupting our time here?
I will allow the question. I won't dock this from the time. I just want to be clear, Ambassador, if you're able to verify the things that counsel has asked you in the prerequisite of the question, that's fine. Otherwise, in questions from the majority or the minority that may assume facts not in evidence before you, you should be cautioned about that.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
The time is with with minority counsel.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
Chairman, I sat here through the first 45 minutes and literally had an objection to almost the foundation of every question that Mr. Goldman asked regarding facts not in evidence, leading. But House Resolution 660 does not say that we are under the federal rules of evidence. If it is your position that I should be asserting objections to questions that violate the federal rules of evidence, let me know now, because this hearing is going to change significantly.
As I said, Mr. Ratcliffe, I will allow the question.
I think the gentleman has a different question about the rules. So what are the rules that are going to govern this?
Does the ranking member seek recognition?
I'm asking, I'm yielding you to the question I just asked you.
For what purpose do you seek recognition?
To answer Mr. Ratcliffe's question.
I have answered it. May I resume your question?
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, you haven't answered my question whether or not I should be assumes facts not in evidence or leading objections to questions that are posed from this point forward? That's my question.
Mr. Ratcliffe, I'll say once again, I'm not objecting to the question, but I am instructing the witness that they should not presume questions from the majority or the minority that may represent facts, not evidence, are correct. I have answered the question. We will resume the questioning and resume the clock.
And then Ratcliffe had a really good day. He did some pretty good stuff here, too. And, of course, at the end, as he was drawing his conclusion, we get Adam Schiff putting his foot in his mouth again. Just can't keep his mouth shut.
Ukraine relations. It's also very clear that you're optimistic about President Zelensky. Ambassador Taylor, you related one of his first acts in office was to remove immunity from deputies, which had long been a source of corruption. I know you had a number of personal dealings with him. Has he given you any reason to question his honesty or his integrity?
No, sir.
In your prior deposition, I asked you, and I'll read it directly. If nobody in the Ukrainian government is aware of a military hold at the time of the Trump-Zelensky call, then as a matter of law and as a matter of fact, there can be no quid pro quo based on military aid. And to your knowledge, nobody in the Ukrainian government was aware of the hold. And your answer was that is correct. Is that still your testimony?
Mr. Ratcliffe, at some point in September...
I'm talking about on July 25th.
July 25th. Sorry. Yes, that's correct. That's correct. They did not know this.
All right. And as it turns out, President Zelensky agreed with you. On October 10th, President Zelensky held a press marathon with over 300 reporters where he said repeatedly and consistently over hours and hours that he was not aware of a military hold during the July 25th call. In fact, in his official press release from the Ukrainian government available on his website that I'll be introducing into the record, he said, "Our phone conversation bears no relations to arms. They blocked the provision of military assistance prior to our telephone conversation, but the issue had not been discussed during our conversation. I mean, I didn't even know." So now, in addition to confirming that because he had no knowledge of it, there was no quid pro quo involving military aid during that call, President Zelensky went on to confirm a number of things: that there was no pressure, that there were no conditions, that there were no threats on military aid. There were no conditions or pressure to investigate Burisma or the 2016 election, that there was no blackmail, that there was no corruption of any kind during the July 25th call. Again, from his official press release. Therefore, there was no blackmail because it was not the subject of our conversation with the President of the United States. There were no conditions on the investigation, either because of arms or the situation around Burisma Company. He told Reuters there was no blackmail. He told the LA Times there was no pressure or blackmail from the United States. He told Japan's Kyodo News, "I was never pressured and there were no conditions being imposed." He told ABC News and the BBC, "I'm against corruption. This is not corruption. It was just a call." The Ukrainian president stood in front of the world press and repeatedly, consistently, over and over again, interview after interview, said he had no knowledge of military aid being withheld, meaning no quid pro quo, no pressure, no demands, no threats, no blackmail, nothing corrupt. And unlike the first 45 minutes that we heard from the Democrats today, that's not secondhand information. It's not hearsay. It's not what someone overheard Ambassador Sondland say. That was his direct testimony. Ambassador Taylor, do you have any evidence to assert that President Zelensky was lying to the world press when he said those things? Yes or no?
Mr. Ratcliffe, if I can respond.
My time is short.
Your time
yes or
is
no?
Short. That's right. I have no reason to doubt what the president said in his...
Okay, very good. So in this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
Mr. Ratcliffe, if I can just respond, let me just reiterate that I'm not here.
I've got 1 minute left.
I know. I know you only got a minute left. I've just got 30 seconds.
Allow the witness. You asked the witness a question. The witness.
I'll withdraw the question. Let me just make this.
And I'm not here to take one side or the other. That's your
Ambassador,
decision.
let me answer this. Let me ask you this question.
The general will suspend.
Spend the time.
Ambassador Taylor, would you like to answer the question?
Suspend the time, please. I withdrew the
The
question.
gentleman will suspend. We will suspend the clock.
Suspend the clock
Suspend
at
the clock.
1 minute, please.
Ambassador Taylor, would you like to respond to the question?
Mr. Ratcliffe, I would just like to say that I'm not here to do anything having to do with to decide about impeachment. That is not what either of us are here to do. This is your job.
We
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
restore time to the clock to 1 minute.
No, but you may continue 22 seconds.
Fine. Mr. Ambassador, I think everyone knows that House Democrats have made up their mind to impeach one president. The question that we've just learned is whether or not they're prepared to impeach two. Because to be clear, if House Democrats impeach President Trump for a quid pro quo involving military aid, they have to call President Zelensky a liar. If they impeach him for abusing his power or pressuring or making threats or demands, they have to call President Zelensky a liar to do it. If they impeach President Trump for blackmail or extortion or making threats or demand, they have to call President Trump a liar to do it.
And the last thing I want to point out to you is something that happened during that break that they had. Yeah, evidently out in the hallway, some reporters got Mark Meadows cornered, and he took them to task. It was really good. And it's pretty long, so I'm not going to play it all, but let me give you just a little clip on it so you can hear what went on.
Overheard the president during that phone call with the... Well, I can say that it's hearsay because that's the testimony that I just came out from listening. So if you've been listening, the American people have been listening. They said, well, I believe, I thought I heard, this was what was conveyed to me. And all of the... Well, you were asking the question. I was going to answer your question. You want me to answer your question? Okay, all right. And so in doing that, when they ask the question, every time that it gets close to the President of the United States, it is very clear. There is no conditionality as it relates to what why the aid was held. And so I think that we're consistent with that, and that's what we continue to hear. But he said any knowledge that anybody has of what Ambassador Sondland may or may not have known, he is on the record to say that he does not know why the aid was held up. So if he didn't know it and he's conveying that to someone else, he is conveying something that he doesn't know. And so when we start to look at this, it all starts to fall apart.
Focus of the
So let me ask you this. For the American people, how many hours have you been sitting in these depositions? How many hours? I haven't seen you. No, you have not read all the transcripts. You've read... I beg to differ because they haven't all been released, so there's no way that you've read them all. But I can tell you, your premise is not right. I've been in those depositions, and I can tell you there's contradictory information. This president had not put any condition on the aid, and certainly when we talk about impeachment, why are we doing this? Why are we all here 11 months from an election? Why not let the American people decide? All of a sudden, what happened is the Mueller investigation didn't work, the Russia collusion didn't work, now they're going to have Ukrainian 2.0. I'm just telling you, I see it for what it is. It is partisan, and it is political, and it has no basis in the in D.C.
So that's what I've got for you on this one. Remember that you can go down here. You can actually type in you can put in the speaker, or you can set it to all speakers and then just type in, whatever you want to search for, like when they talked about Zelensky being a liar. Of course, you got to get past the ones that are familiar. But then down here, this is what you have. And that was Ratcliffe saying that. So the only thing is, not everybody who talked is listed here as a speaker. It's kind of weird. It fades out here at Swalwell, which you don't want to have to go listen to him again. And even over here, usually they list them all, but they don't list everybody. So there were a couple of them, I think, that spoke that aren't listed on here. So anyway, if you get a chance, most of you, I think, were watching one of the Fox feeds, so you probably didn't see this because I think it's only on the C-SPAN one. But go back and watch it. It's really good. He really nails them. So anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.